Digital gauges first started showing up in 1980s cars to varying degrees of success. Automakers pushed hard for them, but the trend all but died in the 1990s. In the 21st century, though, digital gauges made a comeback and it looks like they're here to stay. These are some of the best, according to you. Aston Martin Lagonda. As far as digital displays go, the Aston Martin Lagondas is one of the weirdest. It's separated into 3 different screens, with the left showing a trip odometer and speed, the middle showing fuel, temperature, and current gear, and the right showing RPM and time. All 3 displays use a blocky font that glows a bright green, and it's incredibly cool to look at, if you can find a set in good working order, that is, an automobiler. Toyota Soarer. The Toyota Soarer is cool on its own, but it gets even cooler once you get inside and lay your eyes on the gauge cluster. In true 90s fashion, the digital setup glows a bright neon blue, complemented by a multi-color gear selector. The tach sweeps across the top of the cluster, while a center MPH display gives the driver their exact speed at any time. Ford GT. The Ford GT's all-digital dash changes to present the most important information depending on what drive mode you select. Colors go from gray for normal mode, blue for wet mode, and red for track mode. Depending on what mode you're in, the most prominent number displayed in the center could be your gear, or your speed. McLaren P1. In a race car, gauges must prioritize function over form. The McLaren P1 and P1 GTR does the same thing with a simple tach that runs horizontally across the top of the display, a big gear indicator, and a big speed readout. Elegant and simple. Audi R8. Lots of automakers offer reconfigurable gauge clusters, but Audi's virtual cockpit is easily the best. You can have a big central tach with other important driver information, or you can turn the whole screen into a giant map. It's easy to use, and it feels like the future. We expect more cars to follow this lead in the future. Uyorler. Subaru XT Turbo. The XT was one of Subaru's earliest attempts at making an out-of-left-field car. As was standard practice for the time, it used digital gauges, but interestingly, the tach has a sort of 3D effect, with increasing revs seeming to come towards you. Vector W8. The Vector W8 was easily one of the wildest cars of the 1990s, so naturally, its gauges are all sorts of futuristic. Did they make sense? Probably not, but that's not really the point of a Vector. Lamborghini Reventon. The Murcielago-based Lamborghini Reventon was inspired high-speed fighter jets. Its gauge cluster offers a more traditional mode, but the setting you really want is pictured above. It's like no other car before it, and we doubt we'll see anything like it again. Chevrolet Corvette C4. The 4th-generation Corvette was a car designed to take Chevrolet's sports car out of the dark ages and into a brighter future. Of course, it used digital gauges, because come on, what else would it get? They may look a bit dated now, but this was cutting edge in 1984. Honda S2000. During the 1990s, digital gauges fell by the wayside. When Honda brought out its S2000, it used an F1-inspired cluster to remind people of its motorsport glory. The S2000's gauges are incredibly easy to read, and they injected new life into the digital instrument panel on the whole. Lexus LFA. Lexus said it used a digital tach in the LFA because its V10 engine revved too quickly for an analog unit to keep up. Marketing speak? Perhaps, but regardless, the LFA's instrument panel is one of the most gorgeous we've ever seen in a car. Thankfully, its style lives on in the RCF and the GSF Buick Reatta. When it first debuted, the Buick Reatta had a simple digital gauge cluster and a CRT touchscreen display in the center console. For 1990, Buick abandoned the touchscreen, but it made this excellent instrument panel. This was one of GM's last experiments with digital gauges before they made their comeback in the 2010s. Ferrari. La Ferrari. The La Ferrari has a setting with a traditional rev counter in the middle, but the race display is much cooler. It uses a hockey stick style to keep the upper revs where you need to see them. An incredible display for an incredible car.